Good afternoon, everyone. We'll just hold on for a few seconds more for 2 o'clock to come, and then we'll get underway. I think that's 2 o'clock, so we'll get started now. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Susan Szymborski-Welsh, the Woodland Carbon Code's new Communications Officer. I'd really like to welcome you here today and thank you very much for joining our monitoring and verification webinar. This is the first in what we're planning to be a regular series of webinars about the Woodland Carbon Code. And today, Dr. Vicky West, Manager of the Code, will take us through the processes for monitoring, verification and receiving your woodland carbon units. We'll pause for questions at a couple of different points throughout the session, and before we finish, we'll also hear a quick word from our monitoring advisor, Leon Debelle, on the future of monitoring. Please do pop any questions you have into the chat and we'll do our best to answer them. And I'd also like to highlight that today's seminar is being recorded for anyone who's unable to attend. So without further ado, I'll get underway by introducing our lead presenter, Dr. Vicky West. Vicky has a background in climate science and statistics, and she's played a vital role in the development of the code since its very inception. She's an expert in all things Woodland Carbon Code, so I'm certain her presentation will provide a host of helpful information. And before we start, I'll drop a quick poll into the chat just to find out how confident you currently feel about monitoring and verifying your Woodland Carbon Code project. But for now, it's over to Vicky.
Thanks, Susan. So we would really appreciate your views on the poll as well. I'll just give you a quick overview of the presentation. So we will talk a little bit about the overall process, how you monitor your project, how it's verified, and how you get your units. And then we'll give you some ideas about next steps. So I will stop for questions after we've done the monitoring section, so we can talk about the survey work before we move on. So in terms of the overall process, this diagram shows the whole process that you go through with the Woodland Carbon Code, from registration to ongoing verification, and the area we're mainly focusing on today, which is this year 5. At year 5, the purpose of verification is to confirm that your woodland is healthy and to confirm the actual amount of carbon dioxide sequestered from the atmosphere. This allows the predicted pending issuance units that you were given at validation to be converted into actual verified woodland carbon units. This is just an alternative way of looking at the process over time. At each verification, we look at the growth of your trees and compare to the prediction. So the trees might be your actual and the blue line might be your prediction. So it could be that you're exactly on target, like at year 10 in this picture. It could be that you're not doing as well as predicted, like year 15, or it could be that you're doing better as predicted, like year 25. So when we make these assessments, it will allow us to convert the pending issuance units you were given to verified woodland carbon units over time. If your woodland's doing better than expected, you'll end up with more units. If your woodland's doing worse, we might cancel some of your pending issuance units, but we'll talk about that later. So just a little bit about the timing. The first verification is due 5 years after you finish planting. So if you planted in the winter 2019-20, you'll have received a reminder about your verification at the end of 2023, because it's due to be finished by March 2025. The whole process to think about your survey, go out and survey and verify and get that all sorted out can take a while, which is why we ask you to start 18 months beforehand. We'll talk through this to-do list in a bit more detail now, but basically there's 4 main things to do. That's create a survey plan, and get that checked by the verifier. Go out and do your survey, ideally when the trees are in leaf. Ask your verifier to check it for you, and then update your units and your project in the registry. So we'll talk a little bit about the monitoring. Oops. Essentially at year 5, what we're doing is confirming that the correct number of trees are planted, that they're looking healthy, and to identify any reasons for poor performance now or in the future. Our survey protocol uses the traditional stocking density method, where you sample a small number of plots in your woodland and rate this up to give a total for the whole site. If you're a forester, you'll be familiar with these techniques. If you're not, it might be new to you. So first of all, you need to come up with your survey plan. And this you do using our survey protocol. And it's important once you've got your plan together that you get the validator to check this before you go out on site. There's a number of steps to consider when you come up with your plan. First is that if your original map didn't contain much detail, it would be worth seeing if you can get a better version with the open ground shown or with the different planting mixes shown. This will help you in stratifying your site. Once you've got your map, you need to divide your site into sections or strata based on how the site varies. So that could be planting years, it could be the species mix across your site, or importantly at year 5, it could be the stocking density. So once you've divided your site into areas, then you need to decide for each area whether it's what we call uniform or whether it's variable. So a uniform area might be something like if you'd planted Sitka spruce and it was planted in a regular pattern all at the same time. And a variable strata might be, for example, if you'd planted mixed conifers in an intimate mix, or if you've planted a native woodland where the planting pattern is more variable and follows the native woodland creation guidance. Once you've decided on dividing up your site into strata, you then need to think, okay, within my strata that I've decided, I need to decide what size plots and how many plots that I need. It's advisable to use circular plots as they'll create less bias. Then you need to decide on your plot size. So I've highlighted here some common plot sizes based on common planting densities. So the more dense your trees, the smaller plot you need. Once you've decided on the plot size, you need to think how many plots you need. And within each strata, that can vary from 4 plots to 21 plots based on a number of things. So one is how big your strata is, so how the area of your strata. The other is whether your plot, you decided whether it was uniform or variable. And then the other factor is whether or not your open ground is clearly mapped. So if your open ground isn't mapped, you'll end up doing a few more plots to accommodate that. So we've decided on dividing your site into sections or strata. We've decided what size plots and how many plots you want to do. And then the next thing you need to decide is we need to put all that together. So this is an example of how we've stratified a site. So our open ground is clearly shown in the beige colour here. And we've got 3 strata. So we've got strata 1, strata 2, strata 3. So our strata 1 is we've identified the area of Sitka spruce, which is this yellow area here. And in that we've got 10 plots because this is all at 2 metre spacing regular and it's considered a uniform stratum. The second one we've identified is this bluey area, which is mixed conifers in an intimate mix. And that's at 2.5 metre spacing. And there's 16 plots in this one because we consider this strata variable because there's more than one species. The next one we have is the third strata. We've combined the small area of oak, which is this light blue area, with the area of mixed broadleaves, which is these two green bits. And we've combined them because they are all at 3 meter spacing. And also this small blue area of oak takes up less than 5% of the whole site, of the whole net area. So in that case, it's acceptable to combine it with the closest other area. So there's a limited number of scenarios where you can combine things like this. So generally, if it's less than 5% of the site, then you could combine, for example, here the oak with the broadleaves at the same spacing, or potentially if you had oaks at 2.5 meters and oaks at 3 meters, you could combine them. Although you need to be careful how you calculate your average number of trees per hectare if you do that. So once you get to this stage, this is effectively your survey plan. It's important you make sure that it's checked by the verifier before you go out on site and measure anything. So just what to measure when you go out at year 5. Firstly, let's hope it's a sunny day. Get your boots on, enjoy the day. You'll need some plot sheets. You'll need to think about how you're going to navigate to the plots and record their location. You'll need a way to measure tree height and to measure the plot radius. And you'll also need your phone or a camera so that you can take photos. We'll provide you a template spreadsheet top right here to collate your survey results. For each tree in the plot, you need to note the species, the height, some indications about the health of the tree, and any damaged trees. And within each plot, where you might have 20 trees, you would note the location, take a photo, and note any reasons for poor or damaged health. And then within the strata or the area as a whole, you need to note the condition of any fencing or tree shelters that have been used. You could potentially take a tablet on site with you to record the data straight into the spreadsheet, or you'd need to take paper copies and then update the spreadsheet when you're back in the office. But once you do put the data into the spreadsheet, it'll tell you if your project has the same, better, or worse density of trees than you were planning for. This gives you and the verifier a clear picture of the establishment success and the likely future growth of your project. So I'm going to stop there for now and just see if there are any other questions. I see Andy's been answering a few in the chat, but if anybody had any questions that they would like to raise, do put your hand up and Susan will work out how to unmute you so you can ask a question.
I have a quick question for you, Vicky. Do you need any special equipment for monitoring?
So at year 5, there's nothing particularly special you need. To take the photos, we do want the geotagged location. So most smartphones can give you the location in your photo. You do need a way of being able to check the radius of the plot as you're checking your trees. Some people have used different techniques for that, whether it's a piece of rope, whether you take a tape measure, or even some people have been using one of those extendable dog leads and you can mark the right radius on it. You need a way to measure the tree height. So this could be a cane, and potentially you could take a cane marked with 10 centimeter increments on it that would help you. Obviously tape measure, and I think that's about it really. So there's not too much specialist equipment you need at year 5.
Great, thank you. And I think Alex has a question. I'll just allow your mic, Alex, and put you on camera if you'd like. There we go.
Sure, thank you, Sue. My question is, Vicky, would it be possible for you to run through the output of the stratum summary sheet on the sort of the sheet, because it's not, I don't think it's overly clear, and I have found it a little confusing in the past about what the output is, because we've got you know, the target trees at density, and then you've got percent over, percent under, plots within the target, and then overall versus target planting density overall, and that's tripped me up in the past. Would that be possible?
Okay, I don't have it here straight to hand to stick it on the screen. But basically, I mean, the key thing to note is that you want to know how many trees are in your strata compared to what was predicted. So you might have said you were planning to have 1,600 trees per per hectare, and I guess the key metric is how many trees per hectare have you actually got, which is at the right hand side of the spreadsheet. There are some other metrics just to help you, which would give you an idea if the planting density is even across the site. So that is those ones you're referring to, Alex, where it says how many plots are above or under the target density. And I guess what we're trying to do there is just say, okay, is most of the site okay? It's just one plot that is struggling, or is it that actually all the plots on the site are slightly underneath? So if there's an obvious hole where it's looking less good, it might indicate an area where you need to beat up. But if it's just generally not so good across the whole site, I guess you might take different action then. So I guess that's the purpose of those. The other boxes are just there to help you think about the distribution across the site in terms of how well it's stocked. Does that help, Alex?
Yeah, all right, thank you.
Can't see any more hands, Vicky. So shall we move on to the second part of your presentation?
Sure. So the next part we'll talk about is the third-party check of your site. So as we said previously, you need to contact the verifier 18 months before your verification's due in order to get a quote and to get your survey plan approved. So currently, you can use either Soil Association or Organic Farmers and Growers for the verification. The cost for a single project should be somewhere between £1.5 and £3,000. And there are savings for projects which are grouped and for projects using the small woods route. And the savings in a group depends on how many projects you have in a group. As we said before, if your last planting year was 2019-20, then you need to get your plan approved and get out surveying as soon as you can, if you haven't already done so, so that you could be able to meet the deadline. If your last planting year was 2020-2021, then you should be thinking at this stage about creating and agreeing your survey plan, so that you might be able to go out in this autumn before the winter, or you go out early next spring once the winter's over. But if you could get it in before the winter, it would be great. Then you'd be kind of ahead of the curve. So if you're verifying in a group, just to remember that the due date for your verification is 5 years from the last planting date in the whole group. So you need to think through with a group what that means. So just a little bit about the actual process then. The first step as a project developer is to complete the relevant documents. So that's your progress report, your monitoring report, your plot map, and your photos. You submit them to the verifier, and they will arrange to come to your site for a site visit, and they'll check a sample of the plots that you did. Once they've reviewed your progress report and survey results, you might be required to do some corrective actions. These could be these could be little things in terms of correcting the documentation, but it could be there's a discussion about whether or not beating up is required on the site if the stocking density isn't very good. And in that case, we would come up with a remedial plan, and we'd need to agree what was going to be put in place to bring the project back on track. Once your verification is finished, the verifier will give you a verification statement, and that has this RAG rating on it, a red, amber, green rating, based on how well your project's doing and how well it might perform in future. If your project is rated red, and that because there are real concerns, then it might mean that you have to do a second verification at year 10 just to show us that how the project is doing, and convince us that it's still on track or kind of improving. And just to say, in terms of how projects have fared so far, the good news is that 96 of them received a green rating so far. There was 22 amber and only 5 that have received this red rating where there's some real concern. So that's positive that the majority of the projects are doing okay when it gets to year 5. So the next part of the conundrum is what happens with your units once we're verified and you've got your statement. So we're just going to talk through that now. So once your verification's finished, you need to request to convert your units in the registry. And there's a minimum charge for this of £100 at verification. It could be slightly more if you have more than 2,000 units, but nobody's going to have 2,000 units in the next couple of years. So the minimum charge is £100. When your project gets updated in the registry, it's updated with the RAG rating. So you see these ones here are verified and it's coloured red or amber for these ones. So it's transparent, the status of your project. Also in the registry, your units will be converted to verified woodland carbon units. So you can see in this bottom line for this Buccleuch Straits project at Crary Now, this bottom line for 2018 to 27, the units are still PIUs, but this vintage 2012 to 2018, the unit type has been changed to a unit rather than a PIU. So that means it's a verified unit. So that just shows you a little about what happens in the registry. At year 5, generally, we assume that your prediction is correct if the project's adequately stocked. So we don't give more units or cancel them unless there's any real concerns. I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. But later on, from year 15 onwards, if you deliver more than expected, we'll give you more verified units. But equally, if you deliver less, we would cancel some of the PIUs. So just to confirm what happens for different project statuses at year 5. Not many projects at year 5 will have any units to convert. Quite a lot of projects have no units at year 5, or if not, just a few. So if your project is green or amber and you had 10 units that were going to be delivered between 2020 and 25, then we would just convert those 10 units to woodland carbon units, and you'd have 10 verified woodland carbon units. If your project is red and you had 10 units in 2020 to 25, but we had real concerns about the potential future delivery, then we would cancel all of your pending issuance units from this vintage, so from 2020 to 25. So you would end up with no woodland carbon units from 2020 to 25, and the units would be marked not delivered. So if you've sold those units, you would need to think what that means for your contract and whether you need to compensate the buyer. So just a little bit more on next steps, and then we'll stop for questions again. So we've talked today about year 5 and checking your project at year 5. So the next step after year 5 would be that you would come back to monitor and verify your project at year 15 if it was green or amber. or at year 10 if it was red. And you'd have to do a slightly different survey now the trees are bigger, and go through the same process with the documentation and converting your units, verifying and converting your units. Just to give you a little bit more takeaway information, in case you're not sure where things are on our website. If you want to know more about verification, if you go to Landowners Apply at the top and then go down to verification, then these are the pages that you can see that gives you all the information about what verification is, when you have to do it, who can do it for you, how much it costs, and what the process is. Equally, if you want to know anything more about how you monitor your project and get the standard documents and things, if you go to the standard and guidance and then project governance and then this 2.5 monitoring, this page gives you all the information about creating your monitoring plan, when to go out, what to do at year 5, what to do at year 15. It also gives you a bit more information about the simplified monitoring for small projects, and in future whether or not you'd be able to self-assess. But at year 5, everybody has to go follow the same method I've just set out. So that's all from me. If there's any more questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. I see Andy's been answering questions in the chat, so hopefully that helps some of you. But if there's anything else, do feel free to put your hand up, and we can answer your questions. Alex, have you got another question?
Yeah, me again, sorry.
That's okay.
Quick question about the remedial plan you mentioned. If that's required, at what stage, what point in time will it be required, and what is actually entailed in a remedial plan?
So we haven't set out exactly the details required in the remedial plan, and it partly depends on the situation, I guess. If your project is more than 10% under your planned stocking density, then we would require you to create some kind of remedial plan to say what you were going to do to address this, whether that's that you needed to beat up or fix the fence or ensure that stock were kept out of the site or whatever. I guess they might be the common ones. If you also have a grant, then you would probably have to do some kind of remedial plan for your grant as well, because otherwise you'd be in breach of your grant contract. So we'd also work with the local forestry authority people for that area, to make sure that the remedial plan kind of worked for the grant as well as worked for the carbon code, to make sure that your project was on track, so you fulfill the grant obligation as well as the carbon code. So you would need to submit your remedial plan. So if you do your site survey and you know that it's understocked, then I would just submit the remedial plan with all your other documents to the verifier straight away, and then you're in ahead of the game. If you think it's okay, you can try submitting it without, but I would suggest that if you realise it's understocked, you just submit that remedial plan alongside your other documents when you submit them for verification.
That's helpful, thank you. Just for reference, I think it would be great if there was some kind of a template for a remedial plan, even if it's very basic, just for just so that project developers and auditors and yourselves are all on the same page about what's required. Sure,
yeah. I think a couple of people have asked that, and we'll see what we can do. I mean, I guess the key questions are, what are you going to do? When are you going to do it? Who's going to do it? And how is it going to be achieved? But yeah, we can set out a template for that if that's helpful.
Thanks very much.
Cool. Are there any other questions from anybody?
quite a few in the chat now, Vicky. Should we just take the latest one and maybe answer that to give Andy a helping hand?
Yep.
So Ella has asked, once a third party has verified and approved the project, is the process complete, or do the units have to be converted by the deadline too?
Okay, so in terms of by the deadline, so once your verification statement is issued, we'll count that as you having met the deadline. And if it takes a little longer to sort things out in the registry, then that's fine. But...
Great, thank you.
Is there any more we can help answer, Susan?
I think that just to jump in, I think there is one. So Nick Gaskell's just asked, and it's piggybacking on another question that Andy had answered around red rated woodland creation projects and also the cancellation of PIUs. And so the question is, on the back of PIUs being potentially cancelled as a vintage, is there a possibility of earning more units than expected later on if the project goes on to outperform predictions after an initial problem?
Yes, definitely. So at the initial verification, if there are concerns, we're either saying, OK, well, you get your units or you don't, because we're not actually measuring the carbon. And most people at year 5, you don't have very many units anyway. There'll either be 0 or there might be 10. But when it gets to year 15, we're actually measuring something slightly different. So we're actually saying, what is the carbon stock of your woodland? And so from year 15 onwards, if you can show that the carbon stock is more than the prediction, then you will get more units. So if it's really well managed and it's doing really well, yes, you can get as much more as is actually in the woodland. So even if you showed that actually there's 150 tons, not 100 there, you would get an extra 50 units at that time.
Great, thanks, Vicky. Anyone else want to raise their hand? Okay, well, I think Andy's still answering some questions in the chat. So yeah, thank you all very much for your questions. It's been a really interesting discussion. We will share the slides after the meeting. So yeah, and please do let us know if you need anything more on anything we've said today. Now, before we finish up, we just wanted to introduce Leon, who was speaking earlier, Debelle, who's our new monitoring advisor. Leon's going to give us a very quick insight into the future of monitoring, which will also be a topic of our next webinar. So I'll hand over to Leon.
Thanks, Susan. So this very fortuitously came up in the chat earlier in Vicky's presentation. So I will be giving a presentation on the 23rd of May, and this will be covering the future of remote sensing with regards to the Woodland Carbon Code. So I think the original question was asked, you know, will we still be using a very manual survey method in 10 years' time? I think it's fairly safe to say we will have incorporated some remote sensing technologies into the process by then. I'll be working on it over the coming 12 months, and the presentation on the 23rd will be about what we've kind of done so far and what we can expect in the coming months, because we do have a survey program lined up over the summer, autumn, so that we can start to get some data ourselves and kind of get a feel for how we can implement remote sensing into the monitoring program of the Woodland Carbon Code. I'm not going to say too much more on that because I don't want to spoil it. So I would encourage any of you that are interested to find out how this is going to hopefully pan out to use the QR code or follow the links to sign up for the webinar on the 23rd of May. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Leon. That sounds really interesting and exciting. Yeah, and that webinar will be on Thursday, the 23rd of May at 3 o'clock, and I'll just pop a link into the chat there, or you can follow the QR code. Now, also, before we finish up, we'd like to reshare the poll just to find out how you found today's webinar and if there's anything else you'd like us to talk about next time. So I'll just pop that in the chat. There we go. And also, before we finish, we'd like to ask you for any feedback on today's session. So I'll add another poll to the chat. Thank you. That's great. It's great to see that the webinar's had some impact today. Okay, I think my second poll isn't quite working at the moment, so we'll maybe share that poll along with the slides. But all that's left for me to do is to thank you very much for attending today, and thank our presenters very much. It's been fantastic to learn more about monitoring and verification. And yeah, we hope to see you all at the next session. That's the link in the chat now. Thanks everyone. Bye just now.
Thanks everybody.